Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now today I'm joined by this box. Say hello. Anyway, inside this box is a pre-built PC that my friend bought for me. Now the reason my friend purchased this was because I didn't want to know what specifications were inside. No, I wanted to do a little bit of an investigation into the world of low-cost pre-built systems. If you or someone you know is pretty unknowledgeable when it comes to computer hardware and you just want to purchase a cheap computer that's going to handle all of your daily tasks with ease, or at least you hope it will, should you go down this route? And if you do, what should you expect if you spend as little money as possible? Now obviously the specifications will vary from country to country as well as the price, but here in the UK this one cost £150 and it comes from ebuyer.com. A pretty good company that I've used on multiple occasions. Let's take a look at the box itself. Now, although it's from eBuyer, the PC seems to come from a company called Punch Technology, and after looking them up, it seems that they're actually really good in terms of their Trustpilot ratings. They seem to be a very decent website indeed for purchasing pre-built gaming rigs. At least they have very good customer feedback. Now, as I said, I wouldn't buy a pre-built computer myself, but if you are looking for something cheap, then they don't come much cheaper than this. So without further ado, I guess it's time to open this up and see what specifications we can expect from the cheapest PC on the internet, excluding those perhaps sold by third-party sellers and some of those small form factor boxes you could find. Right, so the box is open and it's time to take out our machine. Ooh, accessories. What have we got in here? Is it a keyboard and mouse? Oh, I thought we'd be getting a keyboard and mouse, but never mind. Power cable there and an instruction manual, as well as a driver disc, which is a nice touch, and a little bag of screws and cables. But now it's time for the fun part. Just some basic setup instructions there. I'm sure we can manage to do that without reading those. And there it is. Here is the £150 PC in question. So let's get it out of the box and see what exactly is inside. Right, so after fighting with the box and the packaging for 5 minutes, this is our PC. As you can see, the case is very basic, but I sort of like basic cases. RGB and all those flashing lights have never really appealed to me too much. We've got USB 3 at the front here, a couple of USB 2 ports as well, and the standard headphone and microphone jack, along with a very nice central power button here, with a nice click to it. Right, so I've taken these little screws out, and the first thing I have to say is that this system is very light. When I laid it on its side, it just seemed very, very light indeed, as if there was nothing in here. So perhaps there isn't. But here goes. What is that? What has happened here? Okay, right. We've got an SSD, which is an excellent start. An ITX motherboard, which actually sits quite well inside this case. A little cooling fan at the back there. A Contour power supply with an output of 300 watts. And we're back to this. So it looks as though this is one of those boards where the processor is embedded. Are there any specs in the box? No. Right. So it actually looks like that we're going to have to turn this on, obviously, for the full specifications, because I can't really make out what that is so far. I know we've got a PNY SSD. PNY are actually among my favourites in terms of SSD makers. I try and always go for those if I can, which is a good start. We've got RAM in here, or laptop RAM at least, and from what I can see there's also no room for upgrading this rig. There's no PCI Express slot here, And by the looks of this processor, I don't think we can upgrade that either. We've also got no DVD drive, but I know that most PCs don't include those anyway these days, and most people building them don't even consider them. I still do, I like having one, but that's no surprise really to see a lack of one of those. I can't imagine this has Windows 10 on it. I don't think that little thing will be able to handle it. But what else could it have? Maybe it's got Linux or Ubuntu or something. But let's get into it and see what it's like to use and try and work out what specifications we have. Here we have the PC connected to the television, keyboard, Dell mouse. Let's switch this bad boy on. Now, it was nice to see the inclusion of an HDMI port on the motherboard. That's always very handy. But we've also got a VGA port there as well, for those of you with that cable. Absolute silence. This is making no noise at all, and I love that. You know, the specs might not be brilliant, but one thing that always gets a few extra points with me is when a computer makes no noise. Why is nothing happening? The fan's gone off. Come on, turn on. What's happened? Right, we had a bit of a false start there. The computer did not want to cooperate, but now it seems to be working fine. I apologise for the flickering. Oh, and it's got Ubuntu. That's really no surprise, to be honest. So we've entered all of our details, and now the system is just configuring. That initial setup stage seemed pretty quick, pretty snappy, but of course the real test will be as to whether this feels fast enough to use on a daily basis. Now, if you're shopping around for a new PC, then it's fair to say that a lot of people would prefer Windows, I think. For the general user and the basic user, Windows is, in my opinion, the better choice, because not that many people are familiar with things like Ubuntu, and if someone who is really not that knowledgeable purchases one of these, then they may be off to a bit of a shaky start. Though I think when you've actually got the specifications in front of you, unlike I had, you're going to notice that nowhere does it say Windows 10, and that may stop you purchasing it in the first place, which of course is good if you're looking for Microsoft's OS. But I'm going to give this a chance. I quite like Ubuntu. And after this, after we've tested out the sort of general capabilities of this machine, I'm going to be installing Windows 10 as well to see how this handles that. But first, of course, let's see what general usage is like when we've got this lightweight operating system installed. So for the initial first few seconds, the whole user interface seemed a bit laggy. When I fired up the apps page, I also took this as the first opportunity to test out some gaming in the form of the inbuilt solitaire. Now, I have no idea how to play, so forgive me, but it was quickly time to take a look at the general browsing side of things, and immediately I noticed that we hit a bit of a snag in the fact that this doesn't come with a Wi-Fi adapter, but this was quickly rectified once I had installed my Wi-Fi USB dongle, something that you'll also need if you purchase this PC. Now, the main aim here was of course to see if this is an okay everyday system, and as we opened up Firefox, it was clear that it was a bit laggy. Now, Ubuntu isn't exactly the most intense operating system, and seeing it struggle here didn't exactly sound promising, especially when I was about to see how Windows 10 performed as well. I also then moved on over to YouTube to see how video playback went. I looked up this fat kid with a big head, started to play one of his pretty cool videos, who you should definitely subscribe to, and yeah, it ran okay. 720p was a bit stuttery, and 1080p was pretty much a no-go. It was a similar experience to how my old MacBook Air that I tested the other day performed. It's quite slow when you want to watch HD video, but at anything under 480p, then you'll have a good enough experience. But is that really good enough in this day and age? I mean, you should expect to at least be able to play 720p video back on a PC, right? Especially any brand new desktop being sold today. I mean, hey, at least Minesweeper ran okay as well, or whatever this version of Minesweeper is called. Either way, I'm still just about as good as this as I am as Minesweeper on Windows. But this is sort of besides the point. Actually, it's not really that much beside the point, because as far as games go, from what we've seen of performance so far, I shouldn't really expect to be able to play anything, but we won't be exploring much in the way of gaming, at least not today. Right, so at this point it was clear that Ubuntu was a little too demanding for our system. The operating system that it shipped with still didn't exactly run all that well, so I decided nonetheless to try out Windows 10 anyway. Now initially I thought perhaps Windows 7 would fare a little better, so I began the installation process, but unfortunately it would not detect my keyboard or mouse, no matter what USB port I used. Looking into this a little more, and it seems that I'm not the only one who's experienced this, and in order to fix it I'd have to run through a few different commands, etc. And I think that for the everyday general user who might pick up a machine like this, doing so might be a little bit too complex or just time consuming in general. I think if anyone buys this and they decide they're going to update to Windows, in all likelihood that operating system will be Windows 10. So after installing the standard home edition of Windows 10 64-bit, it was time to quickly jump into Cinebench R15 and finally discover the exact extent of these specifications. And to what is probably no one's surprise, it turned out that we did indeed have an built-in Celeron, which by all means wasn't fantastic. It was slower in fact than a single core Celeron G460 from a few years back, scoring just 66 in the multi-core test. We've got 2 cores here with no hyperthreading and onboard Intel HD 400 graphics, which in themselves probably aren't that capable of anything. What I will say though is that Windows 10 seemed to run a little bit smoother than Ubuntu, but I did have to make a few changes that I'll explain now. So I had to go into the system properties, into the advanced section, and disable pretty much all of the animations. You know those animations you get when you might open a start menu, open a set of folders, something like that? I had to disable everything, so whenever you clicked on something, the program just opened with nothing special occurring. In some ways I prefer it, but it's a good job really, because this is something I needed to do in order to get better performance out of Windows 10 when just doing even the most simple of tasks. While I was in Windows, I decided to take the opportunity to run a game. Not much, if I'm honest, will likely run on this configuration, so I decided to fire up an excellent piece of abandonware by the name of Big Rigs Over the Road Racing, probably one of the greatest video games to come out in the last 50 years. That's just my opinion, of course, but as you can see here, this game ran absolutely flawlessly. Now we will be exploring more in the way of gaming on this system in another video. I didn't want to cram it all in today's one because I thought it would go on far too long. But we will be looking at a more in-depth gaming experience on this system very soon, seeing what sort of settings we can make to AAA titles in order to try and get them running on this, if it's even possible, and hopefully we can. Well, this has certainly been an experience. I hope you've enjoyed a look at what is the cheapest pre-built PC you can buy here in the UK. I would say I've certainly enjoyed using it, but if I'm being totally honest, that is simply not the case here. This computer is okay running on the stock operating system out of the box, and it may be just fine for one of your relatives or yourself if all you're doing is basic browsing. For everything else, well, it really isn't that capable at all. Now, I read that the motherboard actually supports 8 gigs of RAM, but if I'm being totally honest, I don't think upgrading it would do it the world of difference. That processor is simply too weak. There's no options to add a graphics card either on the board. And even if you do install Windows 10 instead of Ubuntu on here, the experience may be a little bit better if you disable all of the animations, but it still might lead to the point where you're frustrated after every day's usage. And for that reason, I cannot recommend this system. If money is tight, you want a computer to get online, keep in contact, then yes, this will suffice. But for everything else, well, I'd seriously consider taking a look at the second-hand market, not just in terms of desktops, but laptops as well, because for this sort of money, you will certainly find something that's a few years old, 5 or 6 years old in fact, that will do a lot better than this machine. And with that, well, I think it's time to end. Good effort, but unfortunately, you're going back in the box. So, thank you for watching. This has been a look at what's inside the cheapest pre-built system here in the UK. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like on this video down below. Leave a dislike if you didn't. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And hopefully, I'll see all of you in the next one.